tab. So please feel free as those questions generate in your mind to put those down for us to capture towards the end. If we run out of time, we will look for a creative way to be able to address your questions. But just know that we have that option as we go to the end of the agenda. For all of our speakers, we have very limited time, so please keep your comments within 3 to 5 minutes as you are providing your reflections. And we will try as well to call on you to respond to the questions, as I mentioned up above. And so with that, if I could call out to my dear colleagues for a quick family picture for all of our speakers who have access to a camera, maybe just 2 minutes to take that picture very quickly. Julie, Marcel, if you can take over for us and confirm, or at least guide us to be able to take the picture. And then we will go on to our very first speaker. Marcel, Julie, if you can guide us through taking a family picture.
Yes, Robert, so please, if each of the participants and colleagues could put the camera on, we are going to take a picture. Thank you very much. So if everyone can put the camera on, that would be really perfect. And so we can take like a small picture.
Excellent, excellent.
I'm not seeing, okay.
I am seeing quite a few faces already. So
good.
I think we may go ahead.
That's perfect. I go ahead.
But we don't see your camera. We don't see your camera, Julie.
Oh, once again. So I put my camera on. And I do it. Very good. Thank you very much.
Most welcome. All right. So just before we introduced our first speaker, just to make certain that we have everyone on board, we are 5 to 6 minutes behind schedule. Marcel, please confirm that we are ready with the video as Deputy Regional Director, Madam Beatrice Mutali, gets ready for her remarks. Please confirm that we have that video. Let's have it up, and then we have everyone getting ready.
All right, let me share the video.
Thank you. Are you there, Muslim?
A girl,
Excellent.
a child of my childhood, not a commodity, not an object of desire, not a burden to be discarded. She is a girl, with no stone to crush her, with no words to step her, with no grip to hang her, with no fist to drown her, with no blow to beat her, with no flame to burn her. She is silver moon, soft around the edges, a guardian of her own time, tide, and prime. She belongs only to herself. She is a girl, child of my childhood, 1 out of 54 tongues. Here, take, I lend you my wings. Go ahead and chase the shadows. Insult darkness. Be the rainmaker, the rock painter, the sky diver. With every move, go on and build and heal. She is a girl, a child of my childhood, in search of what lies ahead, shaking, moving, stomping, dancing to greet. her freedom. She is a girl, a child of my childhood, not a commodity, not an object of desire, not a burden to be discarded. Ke re ke morwetsana, ke re ke kgaitsedi, ke re ke nnake.
Thank you, Marcel, for that. A moving and riveting piece from Napo Masheane. Thank you so much for taking the moment to share that with us. And I think that takes us off to begin with our program. And I would like to take this opportunity to welcome the Deputy Director of UNFPA East and Southern Africa Regional Office, Madam Beatrice Mutali. Madam Beatrice Mutali is an economist and a development professional with more than 25 years of experience in international and local development, including in program management, particularly around family planning and HIV/AIDS. Prior to joining UNFPA, UNFPA's regional office for East and Southern Africa, she served as UNFPA representative for South Africa and country director for Eswatini and Botswana country offices, and held the position of Deputy Director for UNFPA West and Central Africa region in Dakar, Senegal from 2014 to 2018. I'm pleased to meet you again, Madam Beatrice Mutali. I think we met briefly in 2018. I cede the floor to you, Madam.
Thank you very much. And yes, indeed, we did meet in 2018, and a pleasure to meet you now. I hope you can hear me. I trust you can hear me. So thank you once again, and just like to start by saying a very good morning and bonjour. So delegates from member states, civil society, UN system colleagues, distinguished guests, all protocol observed. It is a great honor for me to join today at this important dialogue, and always is a topic of such importance. As you know, the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development Goals affords us a critical opportunity to reflect on and assess the progress made on our continent to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular, SDGs 4, 5, 14, 15, and 17, being reported onto the high-level political forum in 2022. Progress, again, as we all know, has been made in Africa towards SDG 5 on gender equality and women's empowerment. And it is the focus of this dialogue, while also exchanging and sharing good practices and approaches to deliver on the commitments and aspirations of Agenda 2063. As you know, achieving zero gender-based violence and harmful practices by 2030 is a key priority for UNFPA globally and in the Eastern and Southern Africa region. This is the center of achieving SDG 5 and further the realization of all the Sustainable Development Goals. We only have 8 years left to achieve the bold targets of SDG 5, yet the data remains staggering on the unfinished business. 1 in 3 women has experienced physical and/or sexual violence, including intimate partner violence. 1 in every 20 adolescent girls aged 15 to 19 years, around 13 million in Africa, have experienced forced sex in their lifetime. The impact of COVID-19, coupled with the increased humanitarian crisis, has increased the risk of physical and sexual violence for women and girls. The good news is that we know that violence against women and girls is preventable, and we know what works. Fostering positive masculinity and shifting harmful social norms driving violence against women and girls works. Evidence shows that men and boys are the main perpetrators of violence against women and girls. It is critical to engage them meaningfully, promoting gender equitable norms, behaviors, and attitudes at a very young age. What we see and what we hear shape us. Africa has been on the forefront of men, and boys engagement, and has been pushing the agenda on positive masculinity forward. In East and Southern Africa, through our work on ending violence against women and girls and harmful practices such as female genital mutilation and child marriage, we see the critical role played by men and boys in standing against violence against women and girls, as well as in mobilizing their peers and communities to change negative attitudes and behaviors. Last year, the President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, His Excellency Felix Tshisekedi, in his capacity as AU chairman, sponsored the first ever Continental Men's Conference on Positive Masculinity, galvanizing positive masculinity to end the scourge of violence in Africa, that brought together current and former African heads of state, traditional leaders, civil society organizations, and change makers, resulting in the Kinshasa Declaration. The landmark declaration, among others, commits to the establishment of a circle of champions and the adaptation and implementation of an African Union Convention on ending violence against women and girls. Honorable members, distinguished guests, UNFP is fully committed to supporting ongoing efforts on the continent, including the implementation of the Kinshasa Declaration. Men and boys engagement is one of the priority areas of UNFPA's new strategic plan and our regional program for 2022 to 2025. We therefore look forward to strengthening our partnership with the African Union, UN sister agencies, especially UN Women, civil society organizations, women's rights organizations, youth networks, and traditional leaders to promote positive masculinity as one of the strategies to end violence against women and girls and achieve SDG 5. In conclusion, UNFPA calls for urgent action on our journey to end gender-based violence and harmful practices. In the words of Africa's greatest champion, Nelson Mandela, freedom cannot be achieved unless women have been emancipated from all forms of oppression. I look forward to the discussions, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Madam Beatrice Mutali, for your remarkable opening remarks. And I note once more positive, masculinities. And it's great that you've had a male moderator to be able to be here to steer these discussions forward. I note from your words, 1 in 3 women facing physical violence today. And furthermore, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic in increasing the incidence of violence against women. I note as well that you commit that UNFPA's current strategic plan, in fact, includes these priorities going forward. And so we note with great appreciation your remarks and UNFPA's commitment to this agenda and to expanding the involvement of men and boys in ending violence against women. Now, I think let's move forward and unpack the theme of today's discussions, leveraging positive masculinities for green, inclusive, resilient communities in the post-COVID-19 recovery agenda. And with that, allow me to welcome our distinguished discussants who will give us different experiences zooming into this subject matter even further. Now, we have about an hour for this section of our agenda, and we will appreciate very much from our speakers if we could keep our reflections within 3 to 5 minutes as you answer targeted questions that we've engaged with you directly. Our speakers come from different backgrounds. We have Madame Bineta Diop, who is the AU Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security. We have Madame Chantal Yelumuno, who is the Special Advisor of the President of the DRC on gender-based violence. We have Bruce Sakindi, a youth chair from Rwanda Men Engage Network. We have Natsnet Gebrebrhan, who is coming from Raising Voices Uganda. And we also have Ulemu Kuspali, Head of Programs at Malawi Interfaith AIDS Association. And finally, we will have Beatrice Maina, Dr. Beatrice Maina, who is from the African Health and Population Research Council. And so to begin, we welcome Madame Bineta Diop. Madame Bineta Diop is Since 2014, the Special Envoy of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission on Women, Peace and Security. She is the founder and chair of the board of Femme Africa Solidarité, or FAS, an international NGO created in 1996 that seeks to foster and strengthen and promote the leadership role of women in conflict prevention and peace building in Africa. Madame Bineta Diop has led numerous programs to enhance women's participation in peace processes. She's played an instrumental role in achieving gender parity within the African Union Commission, and those who've worked closely with her would agree, and also the adoption of the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the rights of women in Africa, or the Maputo Protocol, and the Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality in Africa. She has led setting up of the Gender is My Agenda campaign network, for those who are familiar with that as well. A riveting CV that is preceding this wonderful lady. Madam Bineta Diop, you're most welcome. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Robert, and being our he for she this morning. And let me also recognize Madam Beatrice Mutali of UNFPA. Let me just really thank UNFPA and UN Women for hosting us in this timely, the conference, because I think putting violence against women and girls, the core of the dialogue happening in Kigali, for us, it's most welcome. Because I think, violence against women is the most egregious form of discrimination and an impediment to the realization of women's fundamental human rights. So as I said, it's really timely that we are having this dialogue, especially when everybody is trying to find a way to fight, in post-COVID-19 pandemic to mitigate its negative socioeconomic impact. So let me just say with the African Union, because I think we named them, Agenda 2063 in Goal 17, that identify ending violence and discrimination against women and girls as one of the priority areas to achieve full gender equality in all spheres of life in Africa. Let me also quote maybe two other important instruments. I think the Maputo Protocol that have been highlighted, which cements the assertion, which call for elimination of violence against women and girls. So let me just quote what the Maputo Protocol have said, that across the continent, different countries have enforced that Maputo Protocol, either directly through state administrative and policy action, or through decision of courts, both at national and regional level. So indeed, national and regional courts have relied on and made reference to the protocol in the adjudication of cases, ensuring that the women's right enshrined in the protocol become a reality for women and girls. So I think it's important that we recall some of those instruments. The second one I wanted to highlight, the other policy, is the Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality in Africa. I think it only directly calls on state to tackle gender-based violence. It also addresses many issues that are necessary for eliminating gender-based violence. I think it's not only looking at how to address it, but also representation and participation of women in peace process. And it talk about campaign against the abuse of girls, children as wives and victims of sexual slavery. So I think if you take those two instruments, and you will allow me also to highlight Resolution 1325. I think this is where my mandate has been anchored in women protection and women's participation, and respond to violence against women and the empowerment of survivors. I think I will not go on what we have done in my the whole mandate and what we have achieved, but just to say that we have issued the second report of the chairperson of the African Union, Musa Faki Mohammed, on WPS in Africa. But let me just highlight maybe few what the report have revealed and the following. You know, I think the issue of security sector, many governments are adopting gender reform in that security. I think when we look at the issue of justice and fighting against impunity, again, I think the DRC have shown some cases where justice, in the case of Frederic Masudi Alimasi, have revealed 307 victims, cases that have been brought to justice, including sexual violence, and it was delivered in that court. So now I think it's not just having those success story, and we will discuss that. I think despite all these efforts that Africa is doing through the resolution 1325 and others, a lot need to be done again. You talk about positive masculinity. You know, in 2020, Africa and the world at large experienced an unprecedented surge in violence against women and girls. I think it's the result of the lockdown and the movement restriction to contain the spread of COVID-19 pandemic. Everybody was locked down throughout, not just Africa, everywhere. So we call it what happened with shadow pandemic. It was estimated that for an average lockdown of 3 months at one stage, 3-month duration, there would be an additional 15 million, just 3 months, 15 million cases of women gender-based violence in all over the world. So I think that is what motivates and where African women during the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, all of us stood and advocate for male engagement in fighting gender-based violence through the conduct of the African Union Men's Conference on Positive Masculinity under the leadership of Felix Antoine Tshisekedi, president of the DRC. I think this is a historic conference that afford us opportunity to launch the campaign, the AU campaign against Bauji. I think it's unique and we need to continue that, engaging men to come at the front. I am not going to talk about, as has been said before, why there is a need to bring men and boys in addressing gender-based. They are not just the perpetrators, but they should be also part of the solution. So I think by recognizing that ending violence against women and girls as a duty, it's a duty that 10 African heads of state and government came to the conference and made commitment to take decisive action in implementation of the recommendation of the DRC recommendation that came out of the meeting. So moving forward, I think in the discussion, I'm sure that some of the recommendation will emerge. I think we need to move from policy just to go into implementation. And some of the initiatives that I just highlight earlier, we need to scale them up. For example, I listened to President Kagame, you are in Rwanda today, who say there are stop centers, safe space for women. How do we make sure that the one that like Isange we can replicate them in many places. UNFPA have been doing that. I have visited one-stop center in South Sudan, put in place by UNFPA, and other places like in the Lake Chad Basin, in the other region. I think we need to make that. Concentrating our effort on prevention and provision of survivor center services, like, as I said, this justice, medical, psychological, and reparation in one place, give them access, is very important. Invest more on data generation and management system at regional, but also at all level, to look into accountability. And that's what my office is doing by the Continental Result Framework. So again, lastly, just to say that we want to partner with the UNFPA together with UN Women in the implementation of such a program. We know that we have the Spotlight Initiative, the Salima. You have talked about female genital mutilation and others. At the African Union, we wanted to build that, strengthen that partnership within the issues of ending violence against women and girls. And one last thing is the commitment of the Men Conference on Positive Masculinity to adopt and implement an African Union Convention on ending violence against women and girls. I think this legal framework will help us also to end violence against women and girls in Africa, you know, following the Maputo, the Solemn Declaration 1325. This will reinforce the legal instrument that exists in the continent. So I stop there, and thank you so much for your kind invitation to, today to dialogue on these critical issues for Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030. Thank you so much, Robert.
Merci, Madame Bineta Diop. Riveting words there. And it's great really to hear about the extent of the work of your mandate as the AU Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security, and the work that you are doing to create those synergies within the Commission and across the continent with the broad mix of partners, including UNFPA, who are convening us today on the margins of the ARFSD. You know, I'm particularly captured by your words on the launch of the AU campaign on ending violence against women and girls during the convening in DRC, and how that discussion led to the call for an AU convention on ending violence against women and girls. I think it's high time. I think it's very much due. We've had these discussions at the global level. We should be able to articulate, this vision in the continent. And so with your focus on this conference that convened in DRC, I'd like to segue just slightly and bring in our next speaker, Madame Chantal Yelu-Mulop, who is the special advisor to the president of the DRC on gender-based violence, who perhaps will be able to jump right across these comments that you were making, Madame Bineta Diop. Madame Chantal Yelu-Mulop, if you could join us here and tell us a little bit about what transpired in DRC last year, as the DRC was the AU chair for the year, and it played a critical role in organizing the first international conference on positive masculinity. Can you please share with us briefly what is DRC's experience in promoting positive masculinity, and what are some of the developments that have begun taking shape, as Madame Bineta pointed out here, began taking shape after the conference last year? Madame Chantal, you have the floor.
I'm having a hard time to put the video because the person in charge. Okay, thank you.
No problem. So we will have one of our moderators facilitate that for you. Please go ahead.
Okay. So do you mind if I speak in French, or you want me to speak?
You are more than welcome to speak in French. We have translation.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. So first of all, I just want to say, je veux dire merci aux organisateurs, c'est-à-dire l'UNFPA et ONU Femmes, pour m'avoir invité à cet événement. Et je reconnais, j'ai revu Madame Benita Diop, on ne s'est plus vu depuis la fin du mois de novembre, avec qui on a travaillé très fort sur la masculinité positive et que c'était un plaisir de travailler dans cette grande collaboration. Je reconnais Madame Béatrice Boutera, que je n'ai pas vue, mais on a eu un petit moment de conversation au début sur la mise en place de la masculinité positive. Et je suis tellement contente et fière de voir que l'UNFPA, ONU Femmes, veut prendre ça aussi et pouvoir vulgariser ça à travers l'Afrique et peut-être à travers le monde, parce que c'est tellement important que tous les pays du monde et les chefs d'État spécialement comprennent c'est quoi la masculinité positive. Alors, ils ont déjà, je ne vais pas rentrer dans tout ce qui est contexte et tout ce qui est, comment je peux dire, le contexte de ce qui se passe à travers le monde, à travers l'Afrique et le constat, parce que Madame Benita Diop a déjà pratiquement tout dit et Madame Béatrice Boutera aussi a tout expliqué. Mais je vais quand même aller sur l'importance de la masculinité positive. Alors, c'est pourquoi est-ce que c'est important? Je peux dire que, étant donné que les politiques et programmes mis en place n'ont pas permis à transformer les inégalités structurelles et institutionnelles qui conduisent à la violence à l'égard des femmes et des filles, il faudrait mettre en contribution la masculinité positive, c'est-à-dire faire impliquer et mobiliser les hommes de toutes les tendances à tous les âges, c'est-à-dire de jeunes et plus âgés à tous les niveaux, à s'engager dans la lutte contre, afin de promouvoir, de pouvoir inverser la tendance. Alors, si on doit parler de la contribution de la RDC, je peux dire que pour la RDC, en tant que pays, la RDC s'est résolument impliquée dans cette voie au travers de son président, son Excellence Félix Antoine Tshisekedi Tshilombo, qui, comme vous le savez, a organisé à Kinshasa, en date du 25 novembre 2021, la conférence des chefs d'État membres de l'Union africaine sur la masculinité positive. Bien avant cette conférence, le chef d'État, M. Félix Antoine Tshisekedi, avait procédé en date du 19 juin 2021 au lancement de la campagne Tolérance zéro immédiate contre les violences basées sur le genre. Et nous, en tant que collaborateurs du président de la République, ayant le mandat de lutter contre la violence faite à la femme, nous nous sommes engagés à mobiliser et à sensibiliser tous les hommes et tous les garçons à s'investir dans la lutte contre les violences faites aux femmes et aux filles. C'est en construisant une société sans violence basée sur le genre que nous parviendrons à l'égalité de sexe et à l'autonomisation économique des femmes et des filles et par là au développement intégral de notre société. Voilà ce que je voulais dire parce que je pense que les deux prédécesseurs ont pratiquement tout dit.
Thank you kindly, Madame Chantal. I see that your video worked out and we were able to follow you very closely. Please convey, our congratulations to the head of state of DRC for a capable job of convening interest and moving really the needle towards more recognition and attention on this issue during his presidency of the African Union. And as well, a congratulatory note on the campaign, on the launch of the campaign on zero tolerance for GBV. Really, congratulations for that work, and please convey that message, if you can, from this convening. Allow me to bring in our next speaker, Mr. Bruce Sakidi, Youth Chair of the Rwanda Men Engaged Network, to speak to us briefly about some of those experiences from their end as well. Mr. Bruce Sakindi is an author, industrial and organizational development strategist who is ambitious to empower the Africa we want. He is the founder of Grow Up Smart Organization, a youth-led and youth-serving NGO focused on youth economic empowerment and early childhood education. Bruce co-chairs the Rwanda Men Engaged Network. And at the age of 23 years old, Mr. Sakidi is a serial entrepreneur. He's serving as a CEO of Ekubulan United, a manufacturing business advisory firm. He's also the CEO of Tuuza, a collaborative entrepreneurship and culture center, and East African Managing Director of Eja Ice, a solar-powered cold chain service. Phew. Quite an interesting list of engagements you have going on, Mr. Bruce there. Now, please, if you could, the Ubuntu Symposium in 2021 was an important milestone in the work of Men Engaged Alliance in Africa. Could you share with us some of the key results from that symposium and the experiences that you were able to capture there? Mr. Bruce?
Certainly, yes. Thank you, Robert Kasanene, for hosting this wonderful conversation on leveraging positive masculinities to sustain an inclusive and resilient community development for our continent. And I want to take this time again to thank my fellow speakers and panelists, Madam Bineta Diop, Madam Chantal Yelu Mulok, Madam Nasnet Gebreban, and Ulemu Kusupali, and Beatrice Maina, and of course yourself, Robert. It's a pleasure to be here and to represent the youth of Rwanda, but also the youth voice in empowering Africa's Agenda 2063, as well as our Sustainable Development Goals. Indeed, the Ubuntu Symposium was instrumental in opening up conversation and access to information on engaging gender equality and transforming norms. So truly we centered around 5 key themes, which were transformation, power, and feminism, intersectionality, and accountability. And all those key themes were guiding elements in our work and our strategy to advance the gender equality agenda in the country, but also regionally. So what really came out of there was, 1, the access and distribution of information, 2, the incentive to collaborate, let alone on a local and organizational basis, but on a regional and continental level. And what I noticed in the past few months, so as the conference in DRC was taking place, the East African Community Secretariat invited some of the members of the Rwanda Men Engaged Network to participate in a regional working group to ending gender-based violence. And that working group met in Mombasa, Kenya. And there we created the first, it was the beginning of the East African Youth Network. And we learned what are the issues happening regionally in South Sudan, Burundi, Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. And those kinds of collaborative conversations and collaborative perspectives are what are empowering our agendas continuously. And so it has been a pleasure to be a part of those conversations and to establish calls for declaration. And I recently participated in Rwanda's continuing dialogues on engaging positive masculinities as we create an action plan this year to follow through. So that is really what came out of the Ubuntu Symposium, and it has been transformational for local NGOs to obtain that kind of perspective and that kind of mindset towards their own goals.
Thank you, Bruce. And maybe just a quick follow-up, if you may. I had planned to just wait until everyone has spoken and then come back with this question, but I'm quite interested. As a young person, what do you think is needed to get more young men to be advocates for gender equality? What would you say are the barriers to bringing more youth into these spaces? Maybe just a few more minutes.
Robert, I think that is a wonderful question to ask. I was thinking this is a fight for everyone. It's a fight for humanity and the direction of where we lead as leaders, as people who will have children and who will embody the continuation of our space that we live in, and we can no longer lay dormant in conversation. We have to pursue our efforts in action. And I was writing down here that really to join this movement means for men especially, a radical self-transformation, because that is where it stems from. It stems from disrupting those base conversations that I can call locker room conversations that embody what masculinity is, and really disengaging those attachments and empowering ourselves with vulnerability, because I think what toxic masculinity always shies away from is vulnerability, and vulnerability is truly the most empowering force to self-development, to a contribution to society. And without it, we cannot recognize what is missing from the world, and we cannot have the empathetic perspective to listen to people who are not as privileged as we may be, even in this room, the access to have this kind of information and to share these kinds of knowledge. We have to come out of this room and be able to transfer that knowledge with someone who is starting just as at base zero. So for me and for men in general, advocacy means radical self-transformation and engaging in that actively and pursuing really the voice of women and allowing them to tell us what we are doing that is disenfranchising them, and to allow ourselves to listen to that, because that is the hardest part. Someone telling you that you're not doing what you should be doing, or that you're not relating to them as a human should. And so, yeah, that is my answer to that question.
Thank you kindly, Bruce, and congratulations for all the work that you're doing in your series, of great ventures that you seem to be leading. And I couldn't agree with you more. We must be able to expose, these issues as a society. We must be able to broach, these contentious at times, subjects, and also, move forward, these important subjects. I think when we come together, we're able to, to see where the shared, views are, where the shared goals are, and we come out of that with a shared consensus. When we all say that this does not identify, with our, society today, then clearly we are able to move forward with a new set of norms, with a new set of traditions, and then that embodies a new culture, within our society. Moving and inspiring, I think, words from you there, Bruce. Thank you so much for the time. Now we'll move to our next speaker, who is Natsnet Gebre Brahan. I don't know if I've called your name quite correctly. Natsnet Gebre Brahan works as the Violence Against Women Prevention Coordinator at Raising Voices, a feminist organization based out of Kampala, Uganda. Natsnet supports all efforts across the dynamic team, as well as participates in the leadership committee. She's been involved in the field of violence against women prevention and response since 2001, and has a strong background on addressing violence against women in the humanitarian context. Before joining Raising Voices, Natsnet worked in emergency and post-emergency settings in Eastern and Western Africa, as well as Southeast Asia. Natsnet, very, very good morning to you wherever you are, and welcome. My first question to you is, how has Raising Voices been encouraging boys and men in its community mobilization to end violence against women and girls? And why is this approach relevant in the context of COVID-19 recovery? Over to you.
Thank you, Robert. And I'm very happy to be part of this important discussion, especially taking into consideration the era. As we emerge from the pandemic, it's very, very important. And I'll be giving you a flavor of what we have learned at Raising Voices from doing violence against women prevention work for 2 decades. What we understand, violence against women and its prevention is about changing norms. I think you've been mentioning around creating new cultures and creating new and positive norms. And to do that, it's about challenging ideas, harmful ideas, challenging structures and systems that reinforce inequalities in our lives. So that is the starting point for Raising Voices work. And it's also about transforming power relations at all levels, interpersonal, community, institutional levels, private, and then public spaces. And you've also mentioned community mobilization, and community is quite diverse, is composed of different groups, individuals and institutions. So it takes an approach, an intention to engage all groups, all institutions and individuals with an eye of diversity. So if we're just working with a section of community, can we really call it community mobilization? So there is an intention and dedication to find a way, and we have found a way of engaging communities at different levels. And we are now talking about men engage, your question was around engaging men. Raising Voices believes that we have to work with women and men to transform our community, to prevent violence against women. And to do that, we have to find an appropriate method. For example, in our work, what we do is we identify activists from the community that represent the different groups. For this case, like female activists and male activists who engage their counterparts. So because there is some sensitivity around and power dynamics that has to be factored in as we engage into spaces, especially having critical and sensitive topic that relates with power, there should be some safe space to be created to have this conversation. So it's about supporting female and male activists to engage and lead the change process in their community. And to do that, we use the language of power. We don't talk a lot about masculinity because this morning's discussion has been focusing on masculinity. We focus on power because power is the power imbalance is the root cause of violence against women. So it's about helping people to have deep and personal reflection about what power they feel or what power they don't feel. If they are having power, how do they use it? Are they using it positively? Are they using it negatively? And then when we are also engaging with male, we try to bring the awareness and consciousness around privilege, because power and privilege are topics that are closely related, and it really has to be unpacked. So this is how we have been approaching, helping people to really reflect and transform themselves, and before they transform the community. So this is what I could say. Engaging men and women, engaging everyone in the community to transform, because just working with one section of the community doesn't bring the change. Or if one group is moving ahead and the other group is behind, it really creates harm in the process. So to have this intention around doing no harm, everyone has to be in the same page. Everyone has to move in the same pace. So it's very, very important to work with women and men, and then finding the appropriate approach or method to doing so. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nasnet. And I'll do a very quick follow-up with you from the reflections that you shared with us. You heard earlier from Bruce that men must be empathetic, must be able to listen, to women and girls, on what is working, and we must be able to be appreciative of that and accept that. And so you, as a women's rights organization, And when you look at organizations that are working to promote positive masculinities, or in this case, the language of power, as you had said, how can we, ensure that these organizations working to promote positive masculinities ensure that their work with men and boys remains accountable to women and girls?
Thank you. I think that is very, very important question. We have been having a lot of conversations with groups and networks that have been working on male engagement at different levels, like in Uganda, a bit of a regional spaces, and also globally. What we see is like there is an intention, a good intention to address inequality and transform the power relations, gender relations at all levels. But what we see in practice is really different from the intention. So some of the things that I would like to highlight and recommend is when policies and programs are developed, they have to be informed by the experiences, voices, and priorities and needs of women. So just making sure the needs and priorities of women and girls are at the center of their work. And how does this happen? It has to happen because there should be some consultation with women groups, women in the community, or broader women movement in the country or in the region or globally. So this consultation, dialogue, and honest and deep listening is very, very important to achieve the goal. So that is one of the key things that we need to keep in mind. Let's listen to each other. Let's keep our intentions around upholding the priorities and needs of women and girls.
Thank you kindly, Natsinet. The work must be informed by experiences, voices, and priorities of women and girls. Thank you kindly. You couldn't have signed it off in a much better way. Now, let's jump to our next two speakers, Mr. Alemu Kusapali and as well as Dr. Beatrice Maina. They will be our final two speakers, and hopefully after that we will have a moment for a few questions that have been slotted into the Q&A tab. Now, if you have any questions, please go over to the Q&A tab. I believe it is live, yes, our Q&A tab, and please put your question there, and if we have the time, we will be able to circle back and provide responses as appropriate. And when we finalize, I will come back to all of our speakers for a quick half a minute for your final reflections. Now over to Mr. Ulemu Kusapali. He is the head of programs at the Malawi Interfaith AIDS Association, where he leads in the design of programs. Ulemu has over 15 years of experience in social change and project management, and has held senior project management positions within the faith community in numerous programs. At the Interfaith Association of Malawi, he has facilitated the development of various materials for faith leaders in child protection, PMTCT, and ending sexual violence against children. Most welcome, Mr. Ulemu. Now, just a very, very quick question here. From your experience working with interfaith leaders, what have been key elements to support individuals to transform their own attitudes and beliefs? Over to you, Mr. Ulemu. You're muted.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Robert. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be part of these panelists. And thank you a lot to NFPA, UN Women, and particularly UN Women Malawi, for recognizing my institution to be part of this very important discussion, so to say. I'll just go straight to what, Robert, you've asked me. What are the key elements? There are quite a lot of them. I know some are captured in reports, some are captured in many things, but I think what's important is to recognize the role that the faith community has in influencing attitude of individuals and how that manifests into the behaviors to which gender-based violence is part of it. From the past, it has been a challenge to get the faith community, the religious leaders, to accept that they have a contribution towards the negative masculinities that men manifest in families and so on and so forth. But if we look at the statistics that we have in Malawi, where we are over the global estimates in as far as gender-based violence is concerned, because globally we are around 35%, but in Malawi we are somewhere between 40 to 45. And if you look at most of the gender-based violence that occurs in Malawi, it happens in families, intimate relationships. And if we are to talk about intimate relationships, if we are to talk about marriages or families, we cannot isolate the role of a pastor or the role of a church, the role of a church or a mosque, especially if we reflect that in Malawi. So the church comes in very significantly in influencing some of the behaviors that men manifest when they are in relationships, of course, with women, how the church defines a man. Because this is something that men are taught as we grow up. I think it's an understanding in Malawian perspective that religion and culture are closely linked. If you look at the orientation that we go through, and especially in our situation. So we've taken the initiative basically to understand what religion tries to say about who a man is, because that's the genesis of the whole manifestation of the attitude towards women. And also realizing that situation, we have mobilized men to be in the forefront in influencing other men, and making sure that men are coming in as change agents, men targeting men challenging fellow men within the faith community and even outside, because we believe that every one of us belongs to a faith of some sort. But we also realize that different faith groups interpret their doctrines differently. But I am coming from a secretariat of an interfaith, a grouping of different religious institutions that have different perceptions towards these issues that we discuss. But coming together as an interfaith has also assisted religious institutions to learn from each other. Because I think some of the reference points that religious institutions will give you are scriptural. So scripture cannot be changed. However, the scripture interprets an interpretation on how a man should be, that cannot be changed. But the best way to do it, we've learned that when religious institutions work together, they're able to learn on the proper interpretation of scriptures, so that can influence the teachings in churches, the teachings in mosques, and making sure that men are getting the proper orientation when it comes to how women should be handled. I've also mentioned the issue about culture. If we look at the cultural influence on how men look at women, you would see that at the end of the line, there's a woman, because in most cultures in Malawi, men or children are trained by women. I'll give you an example that the first lecture that I had on what a man should be came from my mother. When I went back crying, my mother said, "You don't cry like that as a girl." That registered in me that I am more powerful than a woman. Not necessarily that could be taken in different contexts, but that is promoted even in schools. We see where teachers are saying, "Oh, you see, number one is a girl. What are you boys doing? Girls should not beat you." It's an orientation that we need to look holistically. So my point is, we are, as Malawi Interfaith Aids Association, looking at where is this thing coming from? What are we training our children to be? The youth, as my colleague has actually mentioned, where are these attitudes coming from for men to feel that they're over a woman, and eventually that manifesting into violence? So we've had different programs that are trying to target that. developing guidelines for our religious leaders to make sure that they have content or materials to institute discussions within the faith community, and making sure that we get the results that we are looking for. We are also coming from a past where the issue around gender has been misunderstood by most men, where men would look at every equality orientation as an initiative to take power away from them and give it to women. So women has been going through a situation where they've been shutting down to any discussion like that. They would participate during meetings, they would participate during community activities, but they would not take it seriously to implement it at home because they misinterpreted the first initiatives towards gender equality in most communities. So our task has also been that is not the issue per se. It's not about taking power from you and giving it to anybody else, but it's an issue of power balance, and make sure that we reflect that in the scriptures. So our material development and every initiative that we make, the key element that we make sure is across the board is to make sure that whatever message we're taking to the communities has reference points to the scriptures, so that as communities embrace those particular trainings, those particular ideas, they take it as an obligation to their faith. So the change and making a life better for women should be looked at as an obligation for a particular faith to what men subscribe to. So far, I think that's what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Ulem. And listening to you and those experiences, what your mom told you, I can identify as well with, those, cultural perceptions and indoctrinations, even at my young age, as well. And even your statement, that the faith community, faith leaders, in fact, do influence opinions and behaviors. And in any case, the importance of religion in our communities, we cannot run away from, investing, in that entry point, of the faith community, faith leaders as, important champions and opinion shapers, behavior shapers, within our communities. So I'm interested to take this a little bit further, Mr. Ulem. How do we expand this work then? Because it clearly there's a lot more that we can do. And of course, different, faiths, groups have, different influence spheres within our society. So from your experience, how do we expand this work and what can we do differently?
Looking at the experience that we've had, I think one of the most important things that we need to consider is how we can institutionalize positive masculinity as a teaching within the faith community. Can we come up with guidelines? Can we come up with a form of a policy, for example, to which the faith institutions can adopt, to which they can have a reference to make sure that they are within what is stipulated when it comes to positive masculinity? Because what we have at the moment is depends on particular individuals as pastors, on how they understand the scripture. Because we need to understand that religious institutions operate with a reference to documentation. So documentation of positive masculinity to act as a guide to make sure that religious leaders are able to have information on how they should handle teachings for men and orientations for the youth. It's quite very, very important, because to avoid different interpretations, different approaches to this, to make sure that we have that particular initiative. It is also important for us to intensify on lesson sharing. Religious institutions do change. We've learned that they do change a lot, especially when they're influenced by another religious grouping. Politicians might have their own opinions, but when it comes to religious institutions adopting and implementing a particular change, they look at what their colleagues are doing. So we, as an interfaith institution, where big religious institutions have come together, we're able to experience that. One, for example, if the Catholic Church is able to do this, probably this is also an issue that us as an evangelical association can sit down and review and see how we can approach this. So promoting lesson sharing, promoting that kind of approach amongst and between religious institutions is also quite a very important initiative as we move forward. So in that moment, those are the issues that come to my mind that we can consider as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ulemu. I picked up on the guidelines. I think that would be excellent. Listening to the previous speakers, that convergence of issues, it kind of relates to the idea of having guidelines within the faith community, that communicates, that translates the views of masculinity, the definition of masculinity, positive masculinity in society into something that can be adapted within society. Thank you so very much for your reflections. And accidentally clicked on my microphone. Now we go to our final speaker, and I know that we are slightly behind schedule. We'll try and go as quickly as we can. Our final speaker is Dr. Beatrice Maina. Dr. Beatrice Maina is a postdoctoral research scientist with the African Population and Health Research Center. Her research interests are in adolescent sexual reproductive health and rights and gender studies. She has over 10 years professional experience in the design and implementation of social research projects. She holds a PhD in public health from the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa, and her PhD research focused on investigating the co-construction of masculinities and sexual development among very young male adolescents in Korogocho slum, Nairobi, Kenya. Most welcome, Dr. Maina. Now, very quickly, under the EU-UN Spotlight Initiative, your organization has done a scoping study on the social norms that perpetuate violence against women and girls. Can you tell us some of the findings identified, in this study?
Thank you, Robert, and I'm very pleased and really happy to be here engaging with this esteemed team of panelists on this important conversation on positive masculinities. Just a brief, the Spotlight Initiative African Regional Program supports concrete action to end violence against women and girls and enhance women's socioeconomic empowerment and participation. And under the program, the African Population and Health Research Center, together with our consortium partners, have conducted a scoping review of existing literature, which focuses on social norms that perpetuate violence against women and girls and harmful practices in the African region. And the basis of this review is basically that violence against women and girls is a violation of human rights, and women and girls continue to experience this kind of violence across their life course, with consequences, of course, on their health and well-being. In our review, we did find ways in which violence against women and girls is reinforced. And first, it is through the inequitable socio-cultural and gender norms. And this includes gender roles and beliefs about women's status in the society, and that is the social cultural expectations of what women and girls should do or should not do. And here we see issues about patriarchy and power dynamics, with men assuming more power and authority as well as social status than women. And in this case, it's more to do with women who do not conform to the social cultural expectations, who are seen to violate the social norms, and they are likely to experience violence. Also, by not conforming to the social cultural expectations or taking up some gender roles or responsibilities that are essentially or culturally required to be performed by men, women are perceived to be contesting masculinities, and men are put in a vulnerable space with the likelihood of reiterating in violence against women.
Dr. Beatrice, our interpreters seem to think you're going a little bit fast. Could you slow down slightly? Okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I tried to slow a little bit. What I said was first, it is violence against women and girls is reinforced through inequitable social, cultural, and gender norms, including the gender roles and responsibilities that are expected of women in the society. So that was the first one. The second, we have the socially constructed structures that reinforce inequitable socio-cultural norms, and such includes the cultural and community beliefs about the rights or the rites of passage, as well as marriage. For instance, FGM or female genital mutilation is considered a rite of passage in some of the communities, and this means that every girl transitioning from childhood to adulthood is expected to undergo the rite, which is a violation of their rights. Marriage as well is a social structure, and it has its defined roles and responsibilities for women and men within the society. And still, for some communities, men paying bride price is perceived as the process of acquiring a woman, and thus women are viewed as property owned by men, which men then they have the right to do what they want or what they can do or they would like to do with the woman, which again is a violation of their human rights. In addition to that, child marriages are rampant in some communities, and as well, we know that child brides are immature to handle some adult responsibilities and have no agency to reject practices that are detrimental to their health and well-being. And like Lem said, for some religions, male dominance is seen as the will of God. And therefore, women contesting male dominance are seen to be violating their religious beliefs and practices and going against the will of God. And of course, they are likely to experience violence. And lastly, we did find that violence against women being justified from what was perceived as a moral argument. And for this, we mean, for instance, violence was seen as a sign of love in a relationship, and it was important in correcting wrong behaviors. For this case, it is men correcting the wrong behaviors performed by women and trying to cement the relationship. Secondly, we've seen FGM or female genital mutilation making girls marriageable or perceived to make girls marriageable. In this case, girls who do not undergo the rite are termed as social outcasts, and so they are not right or they are not ready for marriage. And thirdly, we have early marriages, which ensure girls are married before they start engaging in premarital sex, and thus preserving their virginity or purity before marriage. So those are some of the ways in which violence against women and girls is reinforced within our social and cultural context. So I'll stop there for a moment.
Thank you, Dr. Beatrice. And maybe a very quick follow-up in 1 minute, if you can. In your consultations with organizations and networks working to engage men and boys, across the continent, what would you say are the top 3 recommendations coming out of, those discussions you've had?
So the top 3 recommendations, well, there are many, but I'll highlight key 3 ones. One, there are very critical policy and program gaps. And in this, we mean violence against women and girls are happening in context where there are policies and programs that are geared towards eliminating the practices. And this calls for need to perhaps relook into ways in which these policies can be effectively implemented. And secondly, the interventions on male engagement need to go beyond focusing on individuals, but encompass structural and systemic factors that propagate violence against women and girls. So we need to go beyond looking at an individual man, but beyond look at what are the social, cultural, and what are the systems, the structural and systemic factors that reinforce violence against women and girls. And thirdly, the programs aimed at promoting inequitable gender norms need to be initiated at an early age when behaviors are being learned when behaviors are being learned or formed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Not the individual, but work with the larger community. Work with that view, of a larger group, and perhaps attack these behaviors at an earlier age. Thank you. Thank you so very much, for those assertions, Dr. Beatrice, and for being with us. Now we have a few minutes before our time runs out, but I would like to circle back very quickly, if I can, and just to confirm that we still have Madame Bineta Diop and Madame Chantal from DRC. And if you are still with us, I wanted to just come back to you to hear your voice one more time. Everyone else had 2 questions. If you can, within 1 minute, if you can tell us, who do you think can be a champion on, fostering positive masculinities? And what would a continental, network of these champions do, as a strategy to this work? Do we still have Madame Bineta Diop and Madame Chantal?
Yeah, thank you. Yes,
Over to you. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Robert, and really very happy to listen to all the presenters. I think it's bring light to the discussion we're having on the positive masculinity. So let me just say that we need to create the ecosystem. And I think just to follow on what the last speaker have said, where we have that platform of, all the one you call the champions. And champion, for example, we started with the head of state, because we say that we need African leaders themselves to engage in the discourse of positive masculinity. Don't leave it just to those who are already convinced, the gender ministries, the women minister, etc. But here we need the African head of state to really engage in the conversation. And that's what we did in Kinshasa, and also asking President Tshisekedi to lead. And I can see that now the next one will be Senegal, who is the one now heading the African Union. So we need those 10 champions that came already in Kinshasa, engage them to have the 54 member states to come very strongly around the engagement. So not just, and what I like in this conversation is to have the youth voice, and we need them. We need the youth. We need the traditional and religious leaders, and we have them around today. We need the private sector, and we need the researcher, as it was said by Beatrice and others. So we need the women's movement. So really, as I said, it's not just having the convention, and we need to fight for having the right policy to be implemented. But in the meantime, let's make sure that we build a platform where we find our AU champion, the UN, UNFPA, UN Women, those who are working really on the gender equality and women's empowerment. And lastly, I think what we are missing most of the time is the private sector. Because we know that, this decade is women economic empowerment, and some people have talked about it's about power, but it's also about economics as well. It's about finance. It's about, so we need to look at it in a holistic way and build it inclusivity, making sure that every actor that can play a role are involved in this ecosystem. So that's what I'm asking the African Union, that I'm pushing the African Union to be the federator, to be the convener, and bringing with the UN system, bringing everybody at the table, and each one of us playing the key role. I have listened to the issue of, I took note on having guidelines, not just for the religious leader, but guidelines and even curriculum at the university for the young people. So we need to have that transformative approach, which is inclusive, but which bring everybody at the table. And I think the AU can do that, federate the effort, and monitor the implementation. Because if we don't have, I said it, the data, if we don't monitor what our commitment by head of state, like the Kinshasa Declaration, we will go nowhere. We will work on silence and we will not federate. So thank you very much, Robert, for this invitation and being at the AU, being one of the young, youth men in the African Union. I'm sure that you will spearhead this initiative with the UNFPA, but also UN Women and our Gender Directorate and my office, the Office of the Special Envoy. Together, we will lead this process within our institution. I thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Bineta Diop. I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. That mix, of leadership, as you mentioned, from the political youth, traditional. We've had also as well religious leaders here. The private sector, your emphasis at the end there. Couldn't agree with you more. In our work at the African Union on ending female genital mutilation, ending child marriage, we have heads of state and government as champions, Burkina Faso, and Zambia, and they play a critical role in convening their peers at that level. But also this translating to, as you've said, to other, leadership, groups across, different sectors in society. We could not, agree with you more there as a strategy to go forward. I'd like to hear from Madame Chantal, your views as well on this question. Who can be a champion, and would this be, a good strategy going forward? Noting the comments from Madame, Bineta Diop, supporting the work of His Excellency President Felix Tshisekedi. Madame Chantal, are you still with us? And I think you're muted, Madam. You're muted. You're muted. You have to open your microphone. Could one?
Now it's working. I think somebody mute me, so that's why. So I will go on what Madame Bineta Diop was saying. Like the champion, first of all, must be the head of state. And then we can go on the grassroots. That means we can have like the traditional and religion chief, and we can have the business people and the youth too. But so far in my office, we're working with the youth to have like some youth champion of masculinity positive. We already target 8 regions. You need to know that in RDC we have like 26 regions, but we target for the beginning 8 regions, and then from there we will do the monitoring, doing the assessment, and to see and the follow-up. If it's working on those 8 regions, so we go spread that and over all DRC. In the meantime, I think next week or the week after, we will sitting with the traditional chief to see how we can spread that with the traditional chief. But I think when we will we will need the help from UNFPA and ONUFAM to go forward on that project. So that's what we're doing. We're thinking and we're putting that in place. It's good for the head of state to take that over, but on the grassroots, we need to put like the strong young men and strong traditional chief to take care of the masculinity positive and to spread that around the environment.
Indeed. And you are echoing exactly what Madame Bineta Diop was saying there. Federate, these efforts, make those networks grow on the ground, the opinions, the views, and monitor those efforts, because without checking whether or not we are doing something, we will not go anywhere. And so, indeed, a shared view there that is moving, our agenda forward. Now we are just over our closing time, and we have some extra minutes to utilize here, about 8 minutes. And with that view, noting that we haven't had any, questions in our Q&A tab, I'd like to now bring in our final speaker, to provide, closing reflections to these discussions that we were having. I'd like to welcome Adekemi Ndieli, the UN Women Uganda Acting Representative. Do we have her on the line?
I am right here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear. Could someone
Can
make
you hear
certain
me?
that we can hear you loud and clear?
Okay.
Now, could we
Thank
make
you
certain
very
that the video is up and running as well?
I see myself, so
Oh,
maybe
great.
I'm
You
not
have
sure.
not been
Maybe
tagged. I
somebody
think,
needs to spotlight.
indeed, indeed. Now, over to you, Madam. You've heard all of our speakers, today,
Yes.
from Madam Beatrice Mutali, UNFPA, urging us on, to all of our speakers today, unpacking this subject of, a positive, masculinity, and looking at the different groups and the different efforts that we can, move forward, to be able to address GBV on the continent. What has been your understanding here and your final reflections? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Robert, for inviting me on to speak. I bring you greetings on behalf of UN Women's Regional Director for Eastern and Southern Africa, Dr. Maxim Minato, who unfortunately was unable to join us at this discussion due to prior engagements. He sends his goodwill and his regards. Thank you very much for very fruitful and engaging discussions today as we prepare for this year's Africa Regional Forum for Sustainable Development and work to advance a green and a sustainable recovery from COVID-19. We appreciate our partnership with UNFPA, as well as a collaboration for this side event and our partnership for spreading the movement for promoting positive masculinities beginning in Eastern and Southern Africa region. We equally value the contributions of our partners who've been on this panel, from the government of DRC represented and our civil society partners, African Population and Health Research Council, the Malawi Interfaith AIDS Alliance, Raising Voices here in Uganda. We work very closely together, and Rwanda Men's Network, as well as our skilled moderator for this very engaging and interesting event. As we have been reminded today, addressing gender inequality and leaving no one behind are important foundations for progress across the 17 goals within the framework of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. All panelists have referred to commitments that exist, whether at regional, national, or sub-national level in terms of policies, plans, and strategies. State actors, development partners, and civil society can be heard and seen calling for attention to inclusion and a focus on starting with the furthest behind first. However, we also know that the data and the evidence emerging from COVID-19 pandemic and the commitments are not internalized by the individuals and the institutions who have the mandate to act on them. UN Women and UNDP's COVID-19 and gender tracker have shown that in sub-Saharan Africa, only 15% of COVID-19 task forces are led by women, and their participation in these task forces remain equally low at 20%, despite the growing evidence of the disproportionate impact of the pandemic on women and girls. These figures reflect the patriarchal patterns which continue to dominate across the African continent and the world. Today's discussions highlighted the key role of promoting positive masculinities to unlock the much needed progress for the SDGs across Africa. In 2021, UN Women analyzed its efforts over the past decade across regions, engaging men and boys in support of gender equality, and has embedded this learning in our 2022 to 2025 strategic plan. In Eastern and Southern Africa, as in other regions, we have seen that in order to build back better, our efforts must look beyond individual expressions of masculinities and work to transform the way masculinities maintain unequal structures of power within institutions and across societies. These harmful or patriarchal masculinities reinforce the use of power by specific groups of women and of men and women, persons of color, gender, sexual minorities, and persons with disabilities. They embed this same hierarchy of power and discrimination in social policies and institutional practices, which contribute to the slow development that we see across the continent. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown us that we can no longer ignore the problematic arrangements in which power is distributed in our homes, in our communities, and in our societies. The speakers have adeptly today effectively provided concrete examples of the potential of individual actions for promoting positive masculinities, as well as the critical role and the need for collective movements to bring about structural change across societies. UN Women, through our country, regional and global presences, will continue to work in collaboration with individual advocates, including feminist advocates, faith-based organizations, traditional leaders, youth organizations, regional bodies, and sister agencies such as UNFPA here today, to take forward the recommendations emerging from these joint conversations. We will work to grow investment in support of gender equality, and we will co-create space for documenting and sharing evidence of what works to promote positive masculinities, and we will expand the call for action to transform patriarchal structures in all spaces and platforms in which we engage, ensuring that accountability and solidarity with women's rights organizations and women's movement is key to our work going forward. We therefore call on all actors in this arena to ensure that the work we do on male involvement and positive masculinities, one, meaningfully advances women and girls' leadership in the agenda for ending violence against women. And we've heard some of the speakers say that today. We must also ensure that our efforts are responsive to the demands and the guidance of diverse women and girls when undertaking male involvement efforts, and recognize the significance and the centrality of women's movement in this agenda. And in the words of Natslet, we must ensure that priorities are informed by the experiences, the needs and the priorities and the voices of women and girls. We must also see that men who are involved in this space alter their own behavior. And in the words of Mr. Sekindi, radical self-transformation, I love that, and empowering themselves with vulnerability, both at individual and structural levels to aid transformation of patriarchal norms, structures, and systems. We must examine funding decisions made in this space to ensure that gender imbalances are not inadvertently reproduced or fail to transform patriarchy. Finally, we will do, and just a minute, sorry, my phone. We will do the internal and external work that is required to bring about change in this space. And we as UN Women and UNFPA commit ourselves to expanding our partnerships to enable us make a shift in the progress and improve accountability to women's rights groups and for leaving no one behind. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we call on all participants for this dialogue and actors in this space of male involvement to join us in taking forward these very important aspirations together, and we can achieve a green, equitable, and sustainable recovery from COVID-19 in Africa and beyond. I thank you very much for listening. Back to you, Robert.
Thank you, Madam Ndieli, and thank you to everyone, and appreciations to ECA for allotting us additional minutes just to finalize our program. Thanks to all of our speakers. We had over 60 participants online here on Zoom. We also have this running on live stream through Facebook and YouTube. So thanks to all of our participants